I practically fell to the ground beside the car, and I could feel myself going numb. My wounds were leaking blood everywhere, and I was pretty sure I had some type of muscle damage on my shoulder. I could feel a dozen scrapes on my arms and shrapnel in my back. I would find out later that this numb feeling was common for the first few minutes after being shot. The body takes time to process things, and nerve endings need to figure out how much trauma is happening, and the deeper the wound, the more time the body sometimes needs. I was starting to lose focus. I could feel the shock beginning to set in and knew I had only a few moments before I lost consciousness. But I managed to move to her and lock eyes. She was bleeding almost as severely as I was. There were people approaching and voices yelling out. But as I drifted off, all I could see were her eyes. After everything, they were all that mattered. Then it was dark and I was back in time. Families are strange organisms. Not one family is alike. The mix of personalities, ages, perspectives, and genetics make each family unique. Mine was no different. My name is Harry Other, and I was the middle child in what you might describe as a classic nuclear family. Martha my mom, Roger my dad, and 3 kids. My older brother Greg is a burly, well-built guy like our father. My younger sister Joan built petite like my mom. I am the odd one out. Unlike the rest of my family, I have sandy brown hair and have a very slim build. When Greg would bully me, Dad just laughed and said I needed to toughen up. Life is never fair, he always used to tell me. As we got older, we did all the things that families do. We did picnics, outings to the park. I, of course, got all of Greg's hand-me-downs, even the clothes that were 2 sizes too big. So my mom just bought me belts and suspenders to hold my clothing together, though I was always the one out. Greg and Joan always got new stuff, and I just had to put up with it. I suppose that another thing was that Dad was always harsher on me than the others. Greg was like him, and Joan was always his little girl. Dad described me as the mistake. As I entered into my teenage years, my family never worried if I got left out, and they never worried if I got left at home. My mom would sometimes show concern, but then Dad would throw his life is never fair comment out, and I would be left alone. The one good thing that came out of being left alone so much is that I learned a lot. I studied. I built something. I got into science and technology at school and managed to save enough over a few years of pocket money and odd jobs to buy myself a computer. It was computer parts from a few locations, but I built it and learned how things worked. My refuges from my struggles at home were my studies. I learned physics, geography, biology, chemistry, and history. I also learned English, German, and Spanish. I was as a human sponge with all the hours spent alone in my room. I was a straight A student with high distinctions and honors from my teachers in all my reports in school. Though it felt like my parents didn't care at home, I would get a well done and a small smile from my mother and a grunt from my father. Greg just made fun of me being a nerd. In school, he had only just passed his remedial math classes. In the later years of high school, Greg increased the strength and frequency. He used to beat me under the guise of brotherly love, and Dad appeared to encourage it. Joan sniggered but ignored me. Mom caught me trying to ice a bruise over my right kidney one time and held the ice there for me a couple of minutes while telling me not to encourage my brother. But Mom, I don't do or say anything. I try to stay out of his way, but if he can, he always throws punches as hard as he can whenever I am passing by. I whined. The way Dad encourages it and the way Greg treats me, it's like I was born into the wrong family. Mom looked like she wanted to say something but thought better of it. Instead she said, "I'll talk to your father and brother about it and get them to lay you off." Not being built like them, I guess they don't think about it. I guess a couple of days later, Mom must have talked to them because Greg started coming into my room every few days when I was asleep, punching me in the stomach. Dad never said anything. But if a man could pull off a combined sneer and a smile, he was it. I was constantly bruised under clothes that never really fit me. I was careful to ensure that no one at school ever saw the results of the beatings until one day, I was being made to run track for physical education class and tripped when someone in a prank threw a metal bar in my way, causing me to fall and open a gash down my arm. I was sent to the medical bay, and the school nurse, an older lady called Mrs. Erskine, asked me to remove my shirt so she could clean and bind the gash. "Harry, sweetie, it's okay. This old lady has raised 3 sons, and you haven't got anything I haven't seen. We need to clean this to make sure it doesn't get infected." Hesitating a few more moments, I took off my shirt, trying to make sure that Mrs. Erskine didn't see the latest set of bruises that Greg gave me 2 days ago. After a few minutes, I relaxed, and while the wound stung quite severely, she cleaned me up and put a nice and tight compression bandage on the wound. When she finished, I turned and put my shirt on when Mrs. Erskine saw the massive black and yellow mark running up my back. "Harry," she gasped, "are you okay?" I tried to play it down, as I had learnt that in my family, no one likes a snitch. "I'm fine, Mrs. E. I must have fallen over a few days ago and not understood that I hurt myself. She didn't buy it for a second, but she said nothing and sent me on my way. I didn't know at the time, but she put the word out among all the teachers that she believed someone was beating me up and to keep an eye out. One unintended consequence of my being watched by all the teachers at school was that during my senior year, my teachers banded together to help me, although I never knew it. They had figured out that I was not being picked on at school, and as I had no social life outside of school, they thought it was a home thing. The problem was that they couldn't do anything without causing all sorts of drama or talking directly to me about it. It turns out they did the next best thing. As we neared the end of the year, they helped me submit to several universities and ensured that it was a submission for a school a few hours away to get me out of my parents' house. They worked with me to help me choose a specialization, and I found that I wanted to do a chemistry major, so my science teachers helped me submit a scholarship. Taking a risk, my science and chemistry teacher, Mr. Daniels, who I always got along with, reached out to my parents and arranged a meeting about the scholarship submission. They came to the school a week before the submission date, and 5 of us sat in the room: Mr. Daniels, the school principal, Mr. McDonald, my parents, and me. Mr. and Mrs. Other, I don't think you understand the opportunity for Harry here. He is one of the brightest students that we have seen in the last few years, and he very well could have a full scholarship to study at university. Mr. Daniels had been going round in a circle with my parents for almost 20 minutes now. That's nice, but as I said before, I am not paying for the boy to go study. He needs a job and to learn his place in the world, he scowled. Mr. Other, Mr. McDonald invited. What Mr. Daniels is trying to say is that the scholarship that Harry is being offered is fully funded, so you don't have to pay for it. Dad had no response to that, but it didn't take long before he had another reason. Well, all these places are out of town, so he'll have nowhere to live, and again I won't pay for that. We have already thought of that, Mr. Other, Mr. Daniels noted. I have a cousin who owns a business within walking distance of the university. He's been looking for a junior to help out, clean things, and keep everything in his warehouse tidy. It's not glamorous work, he chucked. Indeed, it can be downright dirty and hard work, but it will pay just enough for Harry to have room and board near the university and pay for a few basics like food and his books. I looked at Mr. Daniels funny because earlier, when he told me about the job with his cousin, he told me something entirely different. I would be helping him research and work in a lab very close to the chemistry I would be studying. He looked at me, winked, and gave a subtle shake of his head. I took the hint and said nothing. My dad thought about it for a moment. Well, as long as I don't have to pay and he learns about hard work, and it gets the boy out of my house. Excellent, said Mr. McDonald, getting into it before Dad could change his mind. I have the paperwork here already for signature. It took another hour, but in the end, everything was signed, and we went home. I was surprised when Mr. Daniels pulled me out of class 2 weeks later and handed me a heavy set of envelopes. You're good to go. The admissions board has approved your scholarship, and my cousin Norman looks forward to meeting you over the holidays before university starts and getting you up to speed. Mr. Daniels, I don't know what to say. Just remember me when you rise to the top. He paused. Harry, you're going to do well in whatever you put your mind to. You're smart, hardworking, and you put others before yourself. All the teachers here at school have had a good idea what's happening at home for a while. I went to retort, to defend my family when he held up a hand. It's okay. You don't have to say anything or defend anyone. We just know and figured out this would be one of the ways we could help one of our bright stars from falling to the earth and crashing. School finished up at the end of the year, as schools here in Australia run on the calendar year, and I found that I finished up 3rd in the school rankings overall. I would have been a tie for 1st if my parents had let me go on 2 extra credit off school excursions, but I was again denied. Once we were out of school, Mr. Daniels arranged to come and pick me up to introduce me to my new job. Once we were on our way, he told me to call him Jack, as he was no longer my teacher. Drove over to the next city, which took just over an hour, and he introduced me up to Norman and helped find an apartment for me. It was a fantastic 3-day trip, and I got to talk to Jack and Norman like friends. They listened to what I had to say and explained what I would be doing. Norman had put a word in, and I had the choice of 2 one-bedroom flats between the school and what would become my workplace. I chose the one closer to work, and it was on floor 1 of an older but well-maintained apartment block. The building super was a nice older man and told me to call him if I needed any help. On the trip back, Jack and I spoke about what I would be learning, and I think I was excited to see that there may be more to life than being ignored or treated poorly by my family. The evening before I left, my mother came in with a dozen boxes and began to help me pack everything. Mom, I can't take all of this on the bus. It's okay, dear. I have spoken to your father, and I am going to take you up in these boxes in his truck tomorrow. 1 trip and you're moved. Mom almost cried looking at me but came over and gave me the biggest hug that I have ever gotten from her. Once she had her arms around, though, she broke down and sobbed. "Oh, Harry, my precious and beautiful Harry, you deserve more. I could not do much for you, but I do have a gift." Mom went out of my room and returned with a small box. It was a beautiful A4 notebook and what looked to be an expensive fountain pen. I would use the notebook to record ideas and discoveries in the years to come, and the pen was always on my desk. "Don't tell your father, but I wanted you to have something that was just for you two." She trailed off and looked at me, her composure threatening to break. To know how much I love you." Then, finally, she walked out, and I could hear her blowing her nose. At dinner that evening, there wasn't a lot said. "Joan, don't be more of a loser than you already are." She just looked at me with contempt and looked back at her phone. "Dad, I'll make sure to find another big brother there to help look after you," he sneered. But I felt it was an empty threat as I didn't think he knew anyone outside of town. "And make sure you don't embarrass this family any more than you already have." Mom said nothing but looked at me with the more sorrowful eyes I have ever seen. The other gift I got that night came a little before midnight, with Greg coming into my room and trying to beat me senseless. As usual, I couldn't resist, and he laughed at me as he walked out. "So that you remember your place mistake." I can't say I was unhappy to be leaving. The following year was terrific. I started learning about new chemistry concepts, or combined concepts, and how to make my own discoveries at university. When I wasn't at university, I was at work with Norman putting the theory I was learning into practice. I got to study to my heart's desire, and I was making my own money for once. Being away from my family for the first time, I had never felt freedom, but if this was it, I liked it. Jack also drove up often to hang out and talk with Norman or me, and I thought he appeared to enjoy spending time with me. In my mind, he became the big brother that I always wished Greg had been. I saved pretty much everything on the money front since I never went out, and when I had enough money, he helped me pick out a car. We talked girls, a concept I was too shy to look at yet, and just generally hung out. The only black cloud was that once I had my car, I was expected to head back to my parents for lunch one Sunday a month once I had a car. These were mandatory family gatherings, and Dad demanded that I be there. Since I had moved out, Sunday lunch had grown. Without me underfoot all the time, my parents and siblings now had an ever-changing group of people around most Sundays. It was almost humorous. My family acted as a burden that had been lifted with me no longer there. I got looks from everyone when I was there, wondering why even though my presence was all but demanded. So I just sat on the couch in the corner and politely waited for the afternoon to end so I could head back to my life. Many people who worked for my father were usually there. I wasn't a fan of going alone and being in the same room as them, but as the dutiful son, I obeyed. It was during this early time away, learning and studying, that I made a breakthrough. I made a chemical discovery that increased the strength and longevity of certain plastic compounds. However, when a specific inert common compound was added, the plastic would break down into its inert base components in a matter of a few days. When I presented my findings with Norman at work, he just about passed out. "You're a wizard, Harry. This will change our use of plastics globally and make everything a lot more environmentally friendly." Over the next week, we used the lab and repeatedly proved that my formula worked. At the end of the week, we were sitting in his office when Jack walked in, having come up from school, and we got him caught up. "Harry, I think there are a few things here that Norman and I need to talk with you about. However, if we do them right, then your discovery and formula will make you famous." Over the next few weeks, Jack and Norman helped me through the process of submitting a patent to ensure that the discovery was mine. Right before school ended, I had turned 18, so thankfully, I didn't need my parents involved. Jack also helped me do a deal with Norman that would set up a new business together to produce the plastic compound. For his trouble, Jack got a single percentage point in the business. Over the next 6 months, I went from a low-budget university student to bringing in what high-end management consultants do each year. I still didn't have a social life. It was still just university, work, and the occasional trip to my parents, but I did do a few things for myself. First, I took out a loan to buy as opposed to rent an apartment, and as usual, Jack helped me find the place, and we went through the motions of buying the place. It was a little further than walking distance, so I would need a decent car as opposed to the 1982 green Mazda 323 that was always on its last legs. We looked around the yards, and that's when I saw her and fell in love. She was a 2010 LS7 V8 Camaro, secondhand and in good condition, low kilometers, and upgraded suspension. I had to pay a little extra on insurance as I was under 25, but it was worth it. When I got in and started her up, she purred for me and was always keen for a drive. Most Saturday afternoons, You could find me down in the car park washing and waxing her, ready for the next time I went to drive. Along with my Camaro, I also want to spruce up my personal image a little. I bought some clothes that fit me. With my thin frame, thanks to my high metabolism, I started to think of myself as more than just a nerdy punching bag for my older brother. The next time I headed over to my parents for lunch, I had the best drive, opening my Camaro up on the highway and getting a few looks as I pulled into my parents' drive. A V8 is not precisely a subtle pulling up, so a couple of people came out to see the noise, including my sister Joan. "Hey, buddy, this is a private family gathering, invite?" She trailed off as she looked at me for what felt like the first time. "Hey, sis, it's just your dorky older brother coming back for lunch." She didn't know what to say. However, a couple of her girlfriends came over to ask about the car and who I was. They couldn't believe that I was Joan's older brother, or that I had such a car. It was interesting to be the center of attention and be positive for once. I couldn't help but smile. Inside, my mother looked at me and almost cried seeing my new clothes and smile, but she hugged me. Dad and Greg just glared at me like they always did. Dad looked upset, and Greg looked angry. After that, my father, brother, and sister pretty much avoided talking to me other than a couple of snide comments. But they were listening to almost everything I said. Mom wanted the details. "No, Mom, I'm still your Harry. I've just had some good luck for once." Mom had hardly left me alone since she hugged me and wanted to know about my transformation. A few months ago, I discovered a formula that is going to change the world, and Jack and Norman have been helping me do what they call a patent, meaning that people have to pay me to use my formula. Mom was astounded. But that's not all. Norman and I have set up a new company to produce the compounds that my patent protects, and he's given me a 30% stake in the company. He's got a 30% stake in the company. We also gave Jack a 1% shareholding, and some international investors have the remaining 39%. So everything is leaning toward it being a huge success. Dad had a scowl on his face. I think he wanted to say something but said nothing. Greg, for the first time in his life, he couldn't say anything to me. It's only a little bit of money coming in now. However, over the next couple of years, I think I could be worth quite a bit, and I get to travel to interesting places to do research. I had left my parents speechless for the first time, and my family had nothing to say. It wasn't praised as I got from Jack, but neither was it insults and berating like normal. That week, I went back to work and study happy, and you couldn't wipe the smile off my face. Each month, I would head back to lunch with my parents, and it was different. Of course, I wasn't entirely included. Joan, Greg, and Dad never had any more time for me than they ever did, but Mom and a few of the family friends appeared to be interested in what I was doing. Then one Sunday, I turned up, and Mom appeared nervous. I hugged her, acknowledged without too much warmth my siblings and father, and went to say hello to the day's guests. As I mentioned before, Mom and Dad always had different people on Sundays, and today was no exception. I mingled for a bit. I grabbed a plate of food and went and sat down in my usual spot out of the way to enjoy my barbecue-cooked sausages, potato salad, crusty bread rolls, and people watch for a while. While I was not as socially awkward as I used to be, I still didn't interact that well with this crowd of people, especially those my parents hung around. "Hi, mind if I sit here?" It was as if I had heard the voice of an angel. I repositioned my gaze, and there she stood. If I appreciated my Camaro's color, forms, and curves, then the vision before me made my car pale in comparison. She was tall and thin, looking like just a bit under 6 inch. She had long, soft brown hair that was almost down to her waist. Her waist was tight, and she looked like she had an amazing hips under the jeans she was wearing. Her face was cute, big brown eyes, a button nose, and soft lips. She wore big, thick-rimmed glasses, but they added to the look of her face. I think she had spoken to me a moment ago. "Ah, sorry," she giggled. I think she knew I was caught staring. "Do you mind if I sit here? I wanted to sit and eat." "Sure, I'm Harry." Diana. Over the next hour, we talked about everything we could think of, from current movies and tastes in music to some of my chemistry work in cars like my Camaro. Diana was at college learning counseling to become an abuse counselor, loved dogs, not cats, was a fan of sci-fi movies, and was into console gaming. She lived about half an hour out of town, surprisingly on my way back to my unit, and I must say by the time I had to go, I was smitten. We were still chatting when Mom came out looking for me. "Harry?" "Yes, Mom." Locating me and walking over to where Diana and I were sitting. She saw Diana and hesitated. "Diana, how are you, sweetie?" They exchanged pleasantries. Apparently, Diana had worked for Dad recently, which is how she got invited. "Harry, I was wondering if you could do me a favor. Diana's lift had to leave early because of a family situation, and as you're going by her house on the way home, I was wondering if you could drop her off for me?" "Sure, Mom. That's if Diana doesn't mind riding with me? She put a hand on my arm. I'd love to, Harry. Mom looked relieved. I suppose she wouldn't need to ask someone to go out of their way to drop Diana off. 20 minutes later, I was ready to leave, and Diana was happy to leave with me. I hugged Mom, and as I walked out, waved to Dad. For the first time, he smiled at me and waved back. Weird. Diana was suitably impressed with the ride in my Camaro, and we continued to talk back to her place. Finally, she directed me to a small unit complex similar to the one I lived in my first days away from my parents. It's not much. 2 girls and I share a 3-bedroom flat. We all chip in and get by. I would be the last to judge until recently. I lived in something similar, but just 1 bedroom and no flatmates. She looked over at me, and I could see she wanted to say something as we were sitting in my car. I had a nice time this afternoon. For the most part, your family don't hold you in a favorable light. But this afternoon I saw someone who cared enough about his family that despite the gap between you, you came anyway. Diana, that's one of the nicest things that anyone has ever said to me. There was an awkward silence as the conversation tapered off for the first time in hours. We both knew that Diana needed to head inside, but she was hesitant. Diana, yes. I wanted to ask her out, but I had no idea how. I'd never been attracted to a girl before, and I suppose that no girl had ever paid attention to me. Next Friday, she said. Next Friday? Yes, Harry. You were trying to ask me out next Friday to go and see the new Marvel movie, weren't you? She was looking at the dashboard of my car, just a little demurely, blushing and giving me the opportunity that I wanted and felt had been growing all evening. Yes, Friday. We exchanged numbers, emails, and the usual things, and I wanted to kiss her goodnight, but I settled for an awkward hug. I drove home, and though I didn't sleep a wink, I was floating on air at my lecture in the morning and work in the afternoon. Finally, after a couple of hours, Norman pulled me aside. Harry, would I be right in assuming that you have met someone? Blushing, it just all came out of me. Yeah, Norman, she's beautiful. I met her at my parents'. Her name is Diana. She's studying at college and lives not too far away. Friday night, we're going to go and see a movie. Norman thought it was cute. Puppy love. He kept mentioning for the rest of the week. He kept me focused, though. Mistakes in the lab could cost a lot of money, but my process could have explosive consequences if done incorrectly. Diana and I spoke on the phone a couple of times that week, and when Friday afternoon came, I was nervous, so I called Jack. He had talked to Norman, so he had an idea of what I was going through. For the first 10 minutes, I gave him Diana's rundown and my conversation and told him I was worried I'd screw up my first ever date. He laughed. It's okay, Harry. Some nerves show that you like the girl, but you're going to a movie, so it's not going to be too awkward. For most of the time, you will be focused on the movie. So wear your really good dark blue jeans, that white shirt and white sneakers we bought you a while ago. Don't forget to brush your teeth and wear deodorant. Just be your usual charming self. You'll do fine. But I'm not charming. Harry, I don't think you see it, but the girls check you out all the time. You don't see it. Just yesterday, a couple of the lab tech girls kept their eyes on you as you walked up and down the lab. Between your evolving dress sense, being a young guy driving a Camaro, and the confidence you have in your work, trust me, they notice you. It sounds like this Diana has noticed and wants to stake a claim before someone else does. That just made me more nervous. That night as promised, I picked Diana up at 7. We drove straight to the movies for the 7:30 session. We both loved the movie. Marvel always do well with the story, how the film connects, their special effects. This one also had quite a bit of humor, so we laughed a lot. In one hilarious scene where the main character got caught literally with his pants down by his love interest before he could turn invisible, Diana reached over and grabbed my hand. She was laughing so hard. When the scene was over, she left her hand in mine. I really couldn't complain. However, I think we might need to see the movie again as my attention ended up being split between the screen and my hand held by Diana. After the movie, still holding hands, we walked to a cafe just outside the cinema. Diana dragged me over, and we sat down and ordered Italian hot chocolates. If you have never had one, you need to, and they are divine. Think of a thick chocolate shake only made out of hot chocolate. It's warm and so thick you can stand a spoon in it. We started talking about the movie we just watched, the potential sequels, then we moved more into personal territory. Speaking about what we wanted in the future from our jobs, we talked about my car. I went out on a nervous first date lib and complimented her on how beautiful she looked, dressed in dark jeans with a light blue blouse and navy pumps. Her hair was brushed to a sheen and tied back, and she had a pair of thin-framed glasses as opposed to the thicker ones that just fit like her larger ones. However, what made my evening was that we discovered that we had a shared passion, people watching. Have you ever just sat and watched the people around you, how how they walk, what actions they take as they react to the objects and people around them. We found we love to people watch and make up silly stories as we watch people walk around. One couple, we pretended that they were Russian spies trying to gain intelligence about our little town. Another older couple were hurrying back before the curfew at the retirement home, or the head warden would put them on rations. Another young couple walked hand in hand, kissing every few meters, and they were Romeo and Juliet from opposing houses but finding love. We laughed and smirked, and I thought we had a great evening. After such a great evening, I didn't want to head home, but it was getting late, so we drove back to her place. Again, I got out, came around and opened her door. She got out and hugged me, but she then surprised me and gave me a light and quick kiss on the lips, but the effect was instantaneous. Diana giggled and stood away. Harry, next Friday. Yes? You're taking me out next Friday. Oh yes, you've got it. Undomesticated equines could not keep me away. She laughed, getting the reference instantly. The next few months saw together almost every weekend and even a few evenings a week. We spent a lot of time talking, holding hands and quite a few chaste kisses. I got to meet her flatmate, Cindy, a slightly older lady. She was blonde and well-endowed but dressed conserved, and Dawn, a small and mousy brunette, pretty much kept to herself. I got the opportunity to introduce Diana to Norman, show her around the office, and met a few of the lab team. I noticed a few of the girls started a little longer than was polite as I introduced Diana around. Perhaps Norman was right, and Diana was staking a claim. We tended to travel together a lot. She had a little old Datsun, so we often went everywhere together in my Camaro. I bought us both pairs of aviators, with hers being prescription. Diana was a little perplexed and felt guilty because the cost was close to $300. However, I think I was falling hard for her and wanted to pamper her a little. Diana, let me buy these for you. What very few people know is that I have quite a bit of money between my patent royalties and the business that Norman and I have. Buying you some sunglasses so you can ride with me is not going to affect my bank balance. And we did look good in our matches aviators getting out of the Camaro, if I say so myself. I would say we had been hanging out almost 2 months, really enjoying each other's companies, when the dynamic between us changed again. It was a Sunday as opposed to Saturday family lunch at my parents' house. We both sitting in our usual spot, just out of the way of everyone, and we were engaging in our favorite pastime of people watching. At the same time, we ate a little food when Greg came over to us, waving a newspaper in front of our faces, trying to get everyone's attention because he thought he had something that might embarrass me. Hey, mistake. What's this? He said, waving the paper in front of me. It must be wrong because you are a mistake. He laughed at his poor joke, but what he thought was funny made Diana's day. She grabbed the page and frowned while she read it a moment, then smiled like a sunrise, looking over at me and winking. This could be interesting. Greg, this newspaper article you're referring to thinking to embarrass your brother. She swatted the page with her hand. Is a feeder article to a much larger piece that New Business Magazine is doing on an innovative young entrepreneur getting attention all around the world. So why would the mistake be mentioned? Did he screw up? So the paper put his photo in as a way to highlight his stupidity. He was laughing at his joke. However, everyone else wasn't laughing. I think they may have sensed that this was not going to go Greg's way. I sat saying nothing, but a big grin was growing on my face moment by moment. Actually, she paused for effect, Harry is the focus of not only the newspaper but the full article. I was there when they came to his office and interviewed him. Although the amount of time that they referred to him as the hottest young entrepreneur on the planet was a little embarrassing, she was proud. And what I find cool is that Harry, my boyfriend, she almost yelled the name, is being honored not only for his discoveries in the scientific realm, but the cleverness putting worth over $10 million in under a year. Everyone stopped. Pretty much everyone's jaws dropped. Greg wasn't sure what had just happened. My mother had a combined look of shock and pride. My father just stared. The family friends around were doing double takes and were looking at me, trying to reassess everything they had heard about me. Diana had a big shit-eating grin, looking like the cat that swallowed the canary. Me, I was shocked. My big grin from seeing Greg embarrassed was replaced quickly with a look of total shock. I had just been called someone's boyfriend. It took everyone more than a moment as we all absorbed different information. Then, in the center of it all, Diana looked at me and smiled, pushing her glasses up on her nose, looking like the most intelligent person in the room. To me at that moment she was. Then I was the focus of everyone's attention as everyone wanted to know everything about the article. Finally, someone took the newspaper and read it out loud, and the question started. I explained that my patent around the creation and recycling of plastic and the business that Norman and I had begun to create the compounds using a formula based around the patent was getting international attention. Big business was buying our product as fast as possible to test it and see if it held up to claims. I knew that when it worked, then we would need to expand capabilities in several countries drastically. The interrogation was relentless that afternoon. Everyone wanted to know how much I was making, was going to be famous, was an opportunity for them to be a part of my business. My family was mixed. When I described the money and opportunity, they all lit up. However, when I told everyone that investment comes later and that jobs were only for people trained in the industry, they all looked crestfallen. Dad, in particular, had gone from the shook bad to his usual scowl when it came to me. I suppose he thought he was entitled to my discoveries and money just because he was my father. The one funny one was that Joan suddenly started to pay me attention. I guess she thought I was worth something or could give her money for nothing because she was my sister. Honestly, though, while I wasn't above helping out family, I didn't want to provide them with anything. They had treated me as a second-class citizen growing up. They weren't poor with Dad's construction business, so in my mind, they could keep their money and I would keep mine. There were a couple of other things of note that afternoon. The first one was that when the excitement died down, Diana came and sat on my lap and planted the biggest kiss I have had in my entire life on me. This wasn't the little pecks on the lips that we had been giving each other, but a full lip lock. I felt a thrill when her lounge danced with mine. After she pulled back, keeping an arm around my neck and looked into my eyes, with a look that I could only describe as sultry. I was only 19, and Diana was not even 6 months behind me. Never having been with a girl before, now I was taken. "I'm your boyfriend, eh?" "Yes, silly," she said, looking back at me. "You are my boyfriend, and I'm your girlfriend." I smiled up at those big brown searching eyes and pulled her in for another kiss. It was only my second serious kiss, and damn, I think I loved kissing. While we had been holding hands a lot, from that moment, anytime that Diana and I were in the same room together, you could look at us and see there was always a part of us touching. It didn't make sense to me at the time. However, something else significant that happened that afternoon followed not long before Diana and I left. Everyone pitched in, helping to clean up. Usually, that meant the guys cleared dishes away, put rubbish in the bins, and straightened up. Usually, I wiped down the tables and took the garbage collected over to the bins, and today was no exception. Diana had gone in to help rinse and stack the dishwasher, and when I came in it looked like Mom, Dad, and Greg were all talking to her. She seemed slightly flushed and caught my eye but said nothing more of it. When I walked over, Mom and Diana glanced at me, then Dad and Greg just walked away. I lead Diana over to the other side of the room, away from everyone else. "What's wrong, Dee?" For a moment, she hesitated, then looked deep in my eyes. "Nothing that you need to worry about now. But you're worried. Did my parents say something to upset you?" Again, she slightly hesitated, then nodded. For a moment, she thought, then looking down at her hands, she again spoke to me. "Yes, at the core of it was that they didn't like that I announced your success and that I shamed Greg in front of everyone. They don't think of you the same way I do. To them, you're a failure, but if you were going to be successful, they want it to be on their terms, and I think your Roger thinks he should be in charge of your money." I frowned. Well, Greg did that to himself, and he should have thought about it before opening his mouth. However, he's always been that way. He calls me the mistake because Mom and Dad were not expecting to have me. He and Joan were planned. I wasn't. He's never liked it any time that I was put in the spotlight. And not only did you announce the articles and how successful the business that Norman and I are creating is, but you also announced yourself as my girlfriend. She blushed at that. I drew her hand in and kissed it. As for Dad thinking that I should acknowledge him as the reason for my success and let him run my money, that is never going to happen. Outside of Jack and Norman, no one has shown an interest in me or my success until you. But now I also have the challenge to look after someone I am quite taken with. So I'm going to work hard to be the boyfriend that you need. Oh, Harry. She fell into my lap then while pushing me down on the couch. Mom watched from over in the kitchen but didn't say anything. Sitting in my lap, Diana put her arms around me and put her head to my chest. She may have cried a little. I don't know. The next few months were like a dream. Diana and I spent as much time together as possible. She was starting to come to my place a whole lot more, and we had some tremendous makeout sessions. I even got to feel her up a little, and she liked it. However, I don't think we were ready. Sex was likely in our future, perhaps even our near future, but not just yet. On the business front, things were getting hectic. The plastic compounds we were making were becoming more and more in demand, and I started needing to travel. A lot of the companies purchasing our product wanted to meet me, the young inventor. Some of the travel was domestic around the country. However, some of it was also international. Often Norman came with me, and we hired a PR firm that sent various consultants with us. Large manifesting companies were falling over themselves to meet with us, and I was shouted to big fancy restaurants for excellent meals. I also got to stay in some fancy hotels at the client's cost. I talked through our patented process in meetings, demonstrated how our compounds would work in manufacturing, and gave extraordinary PowerPoint presentations. Each meeting was successful, and Norman was happy as everyone wanted to keep placing orders. I looked forward to coming home each time through, as I missed Diana. When I was traveling, we tried to do a Skype call every couple of days, and I could tell she was missing me as much as I missed her. I took lots of photos of the cities that I visited, and she loved seeing the hotel rooms I got to stay in as well. She had never really traveled, so having a boyfriend who got to travel was both exciting and depressing for her. I was hoping that in the future, we would be able to travel together. My travel also meant that we missed the next 3 months of family gatherings. She noted that she only wanted to go if I was with her. I sensed something in the background there. Both of us were always invited. However, if I wasn't there, Diana always had a reason that she couldn't go. One of the really exciting things was that during our trips is that our investment team assisted us in securing facilities, allowing us to begin manufacturing in 3 new countries, the effect expanding the business exponentially. When we got home from the trip that brought us our 3rd site for Norman and I, along with our senior team, worked our bum off for 2 weeks straight. All B days and no time off at all. This included weekends. It was a busy time, but everyone knew that we would all be set for life if we got everything set up right. So, we arranged that our head office would be the central lab and research center, while our overseas offices would manufacture our compounds for release into the local markets. This allowed us to maintain control and manage local market conditions rather than create everything and ship compounds worldwide. As we were working on everything, Diana regularly brought me lunch, and often she would sit with me in my office or with me in the company lunchroom. We, unfortunately, didn't get to see each other much during this time. Even once we got the management structure out in the initial 2-week time frame, I was still pulling significant hours, sometimes up to 20 hours a day. Finally, by the end of the 3rd week of extra time on work, bringing it 5 weeks since I had gotten home, Diana and I hadn't even had a date. Finally, she had enough and arranged with Norman for me to have Friday night and Saturday off. She didn't tell me and let Norman inform me, and he chuckled when I started to protest. "Harry, that girl adores you. She's been trying to see you every day since we got back, and you need to see your girlfriend. She knows that you're busy and this is important. But Harry, she needs to know she's important to you as well. Take the evening off and tomorrow and spend time with her. Hells, you work harder than anyone. Make sure you take the next few days. We have got everything in order, and the work will always be there when you get back." He gave me a crooked eyebrow and a bit of a smile. "And make sure to give her some of the gifts you bought for her. Let her know how special she is to you." So, that evening actually, I did a bit more than that. I let Diana know I would be home at a reasonable hour and gave her a time to meet me at my apartment. When she turned up that evening, she melted into my arms and kissed me as if her life depended on it. "Baby, I have missed you so much. Lunch at your office doesn't cut being able to hold you." She perked up and pulled back. "So, where are you taking me tonight?" "Sydney." "Sydney? Where's that?" I grinned. "You know Sydney the city, Sydney, Australia? I should have told you earlier. However, we live in Melbourne, which is in Australia. A trip to Sydney was something that we had never done." She looked at me, and I could see that she wanted to burst out and scream. "A trip away? Just the 2 of us? Dee, I've missed you so much. I agree with the lunch visits and flying in and out. I just want some us time. You and me?" I must have said the right thing because I was being attacked and mauled. My beautiful girlfriend kissing me all over the next thing I knew. "When are we leaving?" "Now." "But Harry, I can't. I have no clothes." I produced a packed suitcase from behind the couch. "I picked this suitcase up for you overseas and dropped by your place before coming home this afternoon and had one of your flatmates, Cindy, pack you some clothes." She looked awed, and her eyes held nothing but love. I continued, "I bought it for you. So hopefully in the future, you can travel with me now and then when I have to. I missed you so much that Norman had to talk me down from coming home early twice on that last trip." I looked at her and drew in a deep breath. "Dee, I've got to confess, I'm in love with you." Looking down at my feet, I didn't move for a moment, just continuing to stare at my feet. She didn't say anything, and I had no idea if I had just said the wrong thing and might have to go to Sydney alone. I slowly looked up at Diana, and on her face was a giant smirk that I have seen. She lifted her hand to caress my cheek, a tear in her eye. "Harry, I love you too." The kiss, when it came, started slow, arms around each other, our lips softly meeting, tongues exchanged, and I could feel warm tears against my cheek. I was again floating just like that first kiss all those many months ago, and I knew that she loved me, just as much as I loved her. We need to go. I have arranged everything for the next few days. Just you, me, and nothing else. We caught an Uber to the airport, jumped on the 1-hour-long flight to Sydney. We sat in business class. The hostess brought us champagne, and we sipped it together. Neither of us liked champagne, but we enjoyed the experience of sharing it on a plane. It was Diana's first time on a place as well, and she was curious about everything. Takeoff and landing, staring out the window, even using the bathroom. A corporate car waited for us as we disembarked, and the driver who was booked exclusively to us for the duration of our trip took care of our luggage and drove us into town. He dropped us off at Darling Harbour, where we dined upstairs in an upscale restaurant with beautiful views. Diana was smiling all the time. We tried a few different dishes, enjoyed a couple of drinks, and enjoyed ourselves. After dinner, we took a walk along the harbor and strolled hand in hand along the boardwalk. "Harry," she stopped as we watched one of the ferries dock, its passengers disembarking. I could feel this was going to be a serious chat. "Yes, my love," she sighed. "You have no idea how much I love hearing that, but I don't know if I deserve it." We walked over to a bench that overlooked the waters and sat down. This was going to be a serious conversation. "Harry, I know I don't speak a lot about my past. The reason is that my upbringing was not a happy one. Both of my parents are dead, and I never had any brothers or sisters. Up until a year before I was 18, I was a ward of the state, and that time wasn't a highlight of my life." I nodded. I had never asked because she changed the topic pretty quickly the couple of times I did try to ask. She continued, "There is a lot of darkness back there. I was pushed into doing things that I didn't want to do and things that I am not happy about." Tears were forming in her eyes. "Harry, you are my first love, the first boy that I ever cared anything about, and when I am with you, I feel wanted, desired, and that perhaps the dark things I mention of my past may not be the path of my future. But Harry, I don't deserve your love." Her tears were falling hard now. "I don't deserve it as you are the purest and honest man I know. You give me everything. This trip, in my mind, I never expected anything like this. I was content to be yours in our little town. But you make time for me even though you have the most amazing career and fortune ahead of you. But I am damaged, broken, and I don't deserve you." I think she wanted to say more, so I decided to give her a bit of confidence. "Diana, it is okay. I get that you don't want to talk about your past. I understand that there are some dark things there, which is why I never pushed. But the challenges that you have made it through have made you who you are, the woman I am in love with. We've known each other for over a year, and have been dating almost that long. I can tell you that there is nothing that you can tell me that would make me love you any less. Do you need to bury a body? I'll get a shovel. Got gambling debts, and I'll go pay them off? I love you, Diana Brown, wholly and completely." She broke down even further. I pulled her in close and went to kiss her, reassure her that I didn't care, but she pushed me back and stood, anger flashing in her eyes. "No, Harry, my beautiful, amazing Harry, I don't deserve your love. I'm not pure," she sobbed more. Finally, I was beginning to feel I had an understanding of what she was trying to say. "Dee, it is okay. No, it's not Harry. I'm broken, unclean, and I can't give you the one thing in this world that I want to." She almost crumped to the ground, sobbing and so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "I'm not a virgin." I knew now this is what she was upset about. She didn't want to talk about something in her past and knew that I had no relationships before her, so I had not lost my virginity, but she had. I sat down on the ground beside her and put my arm around her as she cried. I thought about what she said as she cried, heaving big sobs of someone who believes they have lost something fundamental to them. People passed us sitting on the ground, a man holding a woman. Some asked if we were okay. Most just walked around us looking at us but not wanting to get involved. Finally, after a while, I helped her return to the seat. "Diana, from the first moment I met you, I was smitten. You know I never really had any friends. My family saw to that and always made sure to mistreat me at any point that they could legally get away with it. My sister ignored me. My older brother beat me as often as he could till I had black and yellow bruises all over my body. Then, when they would heal, he would do it again. My father openly scorned me, and my mother never defended me. She looked up at me, concern for me in her eyes. Anytime the family went out, if they could leave me at home, they would. If they didn't have to pay for me, they wouldn't. I was only ever given Greg's hand-me-downs for everything. And they made me do 3 times as much household work for half the pocket money that my brother and sister had to if I got anything at all. If I didn't get it right, my father would take the belt to me and leave me sore for days." Diana was now looking at me, scared and a little angry, her brow creasing with worry at what I was saying. "I have never spoken aloud to anyone what I have just told you. I never trusted anyone enough to give them the truth. Anytime someone got close to the truth, I defended my family and their actions. I don't know why, but I did. D, you are under the impression that I would discard you because of your confession. However, I love you more than I did a moment ago. Although you told me something you didn't want to, you took a chance to try and open yourself up to me. I know you don't want to tell me everything, and for now, that's okay. I trust you, that you're not a virgin, and I am fine with that. I didn't know before you told me, but I live in the real world and know that virginity at our age in today's society is rare, so I had no expectation one way or the other. I love you, Diana, and your revelation makes not a bit of difference to me. We are here this weekend because I love you. I am not going anywhere, and I hope that you're going to stay here with me and perhaps a lot longer. My little speech and not giving a damn about her background or her virginity brought a new wave of tears. She held me tight and whispered, "It's not fair. I don't deserve you," along with "I love you," for another half hour or so. It was like a bubble around us. Nothing else mattered as we held each other tight. When we stood up, I don't think I could have pried her from my side if I wanted to. She produced some tissues from her purse and dried her tears, and we walked to a bathroom so she could fix her makeup. I thought she looked beautiful, but she wanted to feel like she wasn't red and blotchy. Once she felt better and came out of the bathroom, we resumed our walk along the harbor boardwalk and found a little gelato place, both of us enjoying a shared cup of cookies and cream. It was nearing 11 at night, and I felt it was time for us to head indoors, so I got out my phone and called our driver. I had booked a 3-bedroom suite for us at one of the fancy hotels near the famous Sydney Opera House. It overlooked the water and had a surrounding view of the harbor bridge and the Opera House. As we entered the suite, we were both taken by the view. We looked in all the rooms, sat down on the couch in the main room, and made out for a while. Kissing her is an experience that I never want to take for granted, and I let my love for her flow through the connection of our lips. I knew that soon we would have to address the sleeping arrangements, but Diana beat me to it. "Harry, would it be okay if we slept in the same bed tonight? I have had the most amazing night, both happy and sad, but tonight I just want you to hold me as I sleep. I want to feel safe and helped by the man I love." I hesitated only a moment. My only concern was that I could not keep my hands off her. I would not have it any other way. We retied to the enormous master bedroom. Both of our suitcases were already in the master, our driver just assuming that we would be sleeping together. I grinned. I was going to get to sleep beside the person I loved more in this world than anyone else. If I was fortunate, I might get to feel her up or maybe get a glimpse of something more. Diana grabs a few things from her bag, went into the bathroom, and threw a kiss at me while closing the door. I slipped into some cotton boxers and crawled into the bed, and what a bed it was. With the business, I have stayed in several hotel rooms, and some nice ones. Still, one thing that always gets me is that hotels will advertise a king bed as part of a room. Still, it's 2 singles put together with a mattress proctor over the top to make it like a king bed, and they are annoying as there is a gap in the middle. This bed was a proper king mattress with high-thread cotton sheets that felt like they had been hand-washed, not gone through a commercial laundry. There was a range of pillow options, from big fluffy pillows that you would sink into all the way to firm pillows that never changed shape. I tried a few different pillows when the door opened, and I forgot all about pillow choice. The woman of my dreams was standing there, highlighted by the soft bedside lamps and the bathroom light behind her. She had a massive grin on her face, and her long, thin legs bare up to a pair of sheer black panties that had floral embroidery hiding all the right places. Her torso was exposed, showing me her tight abs. Continuing upwards, she had a tiny, semi-transparent nightie on, but it stopped a little below her breasts. Right now, I was drooling at her body. She raised her arms in the doorway and posed, moving her hips to the side, accentuating her woman's features. "See anything you like?" My words escaped me, and I was still stuck on her body, going from her eyes to her tits and then down to her panties where I could almost see through it. She laughed and fell into bed beside me, our arms automatically going around each other as another round of passionate kisses occurred. But unlike other times, our hands roamed over each other. "Do you trust me, baby?" she asked, looking into my eyes. "With my life." She smiled, removed her glasses, placing them on the nightstand, and moved down the bed. It was not long before we made love for the first time. It was amazing. We cuddled for a while, then Diana suggested we shower together, which was yet another experience that I savored. I soaked most of her body, running my hands all over her. We also had our first shower sex together. Later, after cleaning up in the shower again, we dried off and walked back into the bedroom. Diana frowned. "We might have to call and get the sheets changed. There is almost a puddle in the middle of the bed." I laughed a little, thinking back to our antics. Let's worry about that in the morning, my love. There are another 2 bedrooms here. We pulled the sheets down to let the master bed dry and walked naked into the spare room across the hall, jumped into bed and snuggled up against each other. Love you, I said as I began to drift off. Love you, Diana said, holding me tight. I woke the next morning to a warm body beside me, an arm over my torso. She was still asleep, and I noticed snoring quietly. I moved, and she began to wake. So I rolled over and stared at her while she worked up and opened her eyes. Good morning, my love. Good morning, Mr. Morning Breath, she giggled. While we had washed last night, neither of us cleaned our teeth afterwards, so kissing was to a minimum. However, it didn't stop us. We fooled around a little. However, we were both hungry, and we did brush our teeth before getting dressed and heading out to breakfast. Watching Diana getting dressed for the day was like watching art being created. I'm going to tease you all day, is all she said. We headed out, let reception know our room needed changing, and headed out to find a cafe, have something to eat, and people watch. We found a little independent cafe, found it had great coffee and a decent menu, and sat down to people watch and enjoy the day. Sitting side by side, Diana never let her hand, never strayed far from mine as we enjoyed it. Honey, I hope you know you rocked my world last night. I laughed, just as you rocked mine. No, Harry, I'm serious. I know I told you I'm not a virgin, and I've had sex twice before last night, she blushed. It was not pleasant. Then, she paused for a moment, but last night, you showed me what it was to make love truly. You made me feel special like the only woman on the face of the planet, and I got to do things and feel things that I have never thought I would ever feel. I grinned. She blushed a deeper shade of pink. I was curious, so I asked, like what? She took another sip and looked at her coffee before looking back at me. Well, I have never gone down on someone before. However, I felt so special doing that for you, and will do it again. She was struggling to voice this, but I was loving how awkward it was making her. She pressed on. Harry, also, I have never gushed like that before, ever, not even by myself. Then, again, she paused. Baby, you were amazing, and I couldn't get enough of you. I love how you gave me everything. To me, you were a virgin again, and I was glad I got to take you. Leaning over, she kissed me tenderly, and we finished our late breakfast and walked around the city for the rest of the morning. I then called our driver, and 20 minutes later we were on a tour of Sydney. He took us to the Opera House, we walked around, got selfies, and had a great time. He took us to the Harbour Bridge and managed to get us in just in time for a bridge climb, an experience where you get to climb up the bridge over the top of traffic. Diana and I had a brilliant day. We got dropped back to the hotel room and made love in the spare bedroom, learning more about each other's bodies and what we did and didn't like. I found out more about her erogenous areas and how to make sure she had almighty orgasms. We showered together, washing each other head to toe, and as we went to get dressed, I stopped Diana from getting anything out of her suitcase. Standing naked, she looked at me. I have a surprise for you. I went to the robe and brought out a suit bag, zipping it open. I brought out a little black dress and matching shoes and clutch that I had bought for her in Paris when Norman and I were there for business last month. It was a designer label. It took me over an hour of going through photos of you with the salesperson speaking poor English to get her size before I was happy with the purchase. She was shocked but pleased. She put on some black panties, and then I helped her into the dress. She was shining and twirled around admiring herself, before heading to the bathroom to do hair and makeup. Harry, this must have cost a fortune. You know you didn't need to. I wanted to, I have the money, so I don't mind spoiling the people I love, people who will appreciate it, not demand it. Demand it? Do you mean like your family? It was the first dark cloud of the day, and I frowned as I brought out my suit bag with a new suit that was made to match her dress. Yes, I didn't think you knew about that. They have been getting pushier asking for money from me. Joan keeps sending me text messages, and Dad leaves voicemails as I wouldn't say I like talking to him. But he believes that they are the reason I am successful, so he feels that I need to give them their dues. Diana tried not to frown as she was applying eye makeup, eyeliner, I think they call it. Your father and sister have both tried calling me while you have been traveling. I've gotten voice messages with them asking me to convince you to help them with one thing or another. They haven't yet been directly threatening, but I have avoided calling them back, and I am not looking forward to the next visit out to their place. It's why I don't want to go there without you. Your mother is nice, your sister doesn't seem to care much, but your father and brother. It's okay, babe, I do understand. You heard some of the things that I had to put up with growing up with last night while we talked. I get it. She stopped and came over to me, looking in my eyes and giving me a gentle kiss. You are one of the bravest men I know, Harry Other. I know I have a hard time talking about my past, and perhaps one day I will be able to talk about it. But in some ways, you have had it worse than me. We finished getting dressed, and we had a car waiting to take us to an upper-class French restaurant. And later, I had arranged tickets to a symphony at the Opera House, but she didn't know. At dinner, Diana ordered a fancy salmon dish, poached and with superb tender greens. I ended up having a steak with burnt butter sauce and excellently crafted vegetables. We finished our dinner and were contemplating dessert when one of the waiters walking by accidentally dropped an ornately carved box that looked like it held jewelry from the period when there was French royalty. I was instantly out of my seat, asking if the waiter was okay and helping him pick up everything and help him on his way. He acted a little embarrassed but was otherwise fine. Most of the restaurant had stopped to watch the commotion and saw Diana get out of her seat and move to help as well. The waiter moved away and then turned to watch what would happen next as I stayed kneeling and turned around, holding the small box open with a diamond ring inside. Everyone in the restaurant suddenly held their breath, and Diana gasped. "Diana Brown, from the day I met you, you have captured my heart. You make me want to be a better man. Your smile lights my way, and your hands holding mine makes me feel like there is nothing in this world that I can't do. This past year has shown me that my soul belongs to you, and I would be ever so honored if you would consent to be my wife." For just a moment, everyone held their collective breath, and she looked at me. Then she remembered to breathe. "Yes!" she screamed and threw herself to me, hugging me as I stood. I plucked the ring from the box, and she held out her fingers, allowing me to slide the engagement ring on her hand. Everyone cheered, and a round of applause sprang up. She beamed, looking between the ring and myself as the restaurant manager and the same waiter that dropped the ring box came over to us. He congratulated us and comped our entire meal in front of everyone, happy to see an accepted proposal. As he left, another couple came over and congratulated us, and for the next half hour, many people came over. I don't think I had seen Diana as happy before. The last couple coming over, though, made her gasp. One of her roommates, Cindy, walked over hand in hand with Jack. I had known, but Diana hadn't known that they had been dating for about a month. Jack had told me, and I was happy. They were only a few years apart in age, and they suited each other. Cindy gave Diana an enormous hug as Jack gave me a hug like a big brother. We sat back down at the table, and they joined us for dessert. Over a cheese and pork dish, I let Diana know how I planned it all out and had Jack and Cindy fly in this afternoon to wait for my proposal. I then surprised the three of them that I had 4 tickets for tonight's symphony at the Opera House with a limo waiting outside for all of us. It was a grand evening. I had my fiancé on my arm dressed to the nines, a man who I saw my best friend beside me and his new girlfriend as well. The symphony's music was amazing, and since we were all dressed up, we felt part of something bigger. Over the preceding years, when Diana and I traveled, we would attend a symphony in town. It was around 1 in the morning when the limo took the 4 of us back to the hotel, and we parted ways with Jack and Cindy heading to the room I had got for them and us to ours. "I wonder if Jack's going to get lucky with Cindy tonight as much as you're going to, mister." Diana then undressed. Taking everything off except her glasses and her engagement ring, she crawled onto the bed and bent over. "I need some hard loving, Harry." I think the sun was starting to come up when we finished, and we once again needed to sleep in one of the spare rooms due to the mess we left in the master bedroom. We slept until almost noon, when a text message from Jack woke us up. "Hey buddy, it's lunchtime. Are you two decent enough to come and join us before we fly home?" I replied that we would be down in half an hour, and we kissed, got up, showered, dressed, and packed. I called reception, and they sent someone for our bags, and we met with Jack and Cindy. "Whoa, Diana, are you okay?" Cindy had a slight look of concern for a moment as Diana used my help to sit down at the restaurant cafe in the hotel's lobby. We didn't get to sleep until around 5 this morning, and I am a little tender from Harry's attention. Cindy took a moment and then burst out laughing. Jack reached out with a clenched fist to me, and I gave him a fist bump. After that, we ordered some food, and the girls headed to the bathroom while Jack and I talked about it last night. After my first night, he made sure I was okay, drooping the words, "Harry is the man," several times. We then got onto a chemistry discussion and my upcoming graduation from university. Although, when the girls got back, Cindy was looking at me with a bit of envy in her eyes and a whole lot of respect when she whispered in Jack's ear. His eyes went wide, and he turned back to me. "Holy shit, dude," was all he said. I have no idea what they said, but I felt like the man. We were excited to get married, and within a week of returning, we had set a date of just over 6 months later to get married. Diana also all but moved in once we got home. There were not many nights that she wasn't staying over, just now and then to help one of her soon-to-be former flatmates out while she moved things. We also spoke about her studies, and she chose to do her study remove to be near me. She became a little bit of a fixture around the office. She used the coffee table by my couch for her laptop and books, and while she slowed down her subjects, she still keeps high marks. It was also great as I had her travel with me a little too. While it was mainly for work, some of our clients and investors doted on Diana being with me and seeing the love of my life. I loved showing her some of the places I had been. We ended up making love in pretty much every city we visited. On the family front, it was quite a mixed reaction. We made sure that we went to the next family gathering following my proposal in Sydney, and we let them know that we were going to get married. Diana was very proud of showing off her simple yet elegant diamond engagement ring. Everyone's reactions were varied. Mom was excited and couldn't help but smile. I even got a grudging congratulations from my father. Joan was surprisingly the most vocal of the group, heartily approving of our engagement, telling everyone that she'd love to see Diana make an honest man out of me. "Oh honey," was Diana's reply to Joan down the bridge of her nose. "With how funny your brother made me walk the day after he proposed, I can tell you he's one hell of a big man." Joan pretty much spats her drink all over the table, and my mouth blushed as no one liked to hear about their son's sexual prowess. My father and brother also went red, but I am not sure if it was anger and embarrassment. For the rest of the afternoon, Diana kept getting looked at by everyone. I was content to sit back and bask in the glory that my fiancé brought my way. It was one of the very few times that no one bothered me. Another fun thing was that I also got to graduate from university with my degree in chemistry. While I thought about doing postdoctoral work between the business and Diana, I didn't think I would have the time. Besides, I could always go back later to study. The company was booming. We had over 800 employees in 8 locations around the world now. Here at home, we produced the main compound and then shipped that to the other plants to produce the special plastics we had become famous for. The patent I had made it difficult for other companies to produce the compound without paying me a fee, so I knew that Diana and I would never lack money. It was that front that became the only issue in the lead up to the wedding. My legal team was employed to look after my best interests, which included protecting my assets in marriage or the case of an accident. This meant that they wanted Diana to sign a pretty detailed prenup. While she was fine with it, surprisingly, my family were not. At the regular family gathering, we were all sitting around and talking about our upcoming nuptials. I was sitting on one couch with Diana, Mom, and Dad on another. Joan was sitting with her current boyfriend, Fred. This one was named, or I could have just made that name up. She had a different on every gathering these days. Greg sat alone in his armchair. I don't think there were too many girls out there who could put up with him. He was always self-righteous and thought he could not say or do anything wrong when it often went the other way. I think it was because my dad gave him everything and never pulled him up. Everyone except Diana and I were against the prenup. "It's just not right, boy. You're marrying Diana and everything should be shared. A prenup is the rich man's way of keeping everything for themselves and never giving it to the little guy," my dad was saying. "But Dad, I am one of the rich. And it's not that I have anything to hold back from Diana," she squeezed my hand. "However, you need to understand that the prenup is not just to protect me, but all of my employees. It makes sure that if anything happens to me that everyone, including Diana, is looked after." Dad looked upset. "Besides, according to the terms of the agreement, Diana is well looked after in any event, so I would never hold anything back from her." Diana squeezed my hand again. "Dad, Diana had taken to calling my parents Mom and Dad since we got engaged. I think it makes Dad awkward, which is why she did it. I am 100% in Harry's court. I'm going to sign the prenup because I know that he will always look after me. I've got nothing to lose, and it's the right thing to do." She stared my dad down, and for a few moments, it was like there was an unseen conversation going on. If it were me, there would be no prenup.